his shadow faced the wrong way. Your mind knows how the world is supposed to look, which can be used against you. It's like how you can read an essay over and over without noticing a misspelled word. Your mind fixes it for you. And at times it fixes things too well. There are tens of thousands of miles of desert beneath the rainy shadow of the Sierra Nevada. It is surrounded by civilization. You've all heard of Vegas and LA, but there are other population centers. Lesser-known cities crowd the borders of the desert, some with populations reaching into the hundreds of thousands. With this amount of human activity, one would be led to believe that the desert is mapped and explored. Its secrets were revealed and mysteries uncovered. Do not make that mistake. The desert is primeval. As you drive deeper and deeper, you'll notice the towns growing smaller, until they are nothing but groups of buildings and trailers huddled together, boasting a store or two. And when you pass those, there is nothing. Golden sand stretches to the horizon, broken by mountains of jagged stone cut smooth by the wind. It is huge, the kind that the human mind struggles to comprehend. I imagine the people who lived here before, long before cars or planes, could have thought this was the entire world. I came to traverse the desert roads quite by accident. 3 years into college, I found myself low on cash but not lacking in free time. So that summer, through my ecology professor, I landed a paid internship studying plant life in the Mojave Preserve. With nothing better to do and rent due, I signed up immediately and left the following week. My temporary home for the next few months was to be a house in the little town of Baker, owned by the National Park Service, I believe. It was 5 hours away from the university in San Luis Obispo and 3 hours from my parents' house in LA, on a good day. After the novelty of my internship wore off, I found life on the edge of civilization to be rather boring. The boiling heat kept you inside most afternoons, and there was hardly anything entertainment-wise after sunset. I began watching the stars instead, ordered myself a book on astronomy, and began memorizing so many constellations of which the ancient Greeks would have been proud. More often than not, I drove home on the weekends and sometimes even back to school to catch up with friends. It wasn't the shortest drive, but believe me when I say there was nothing better to do. It was on one of these drives when everything began to go wrong. On a weekend in late June, I promised my old roommates that I would be back Saturday for a get-together. Even though I finished work late the day before, I was determined to make the drive. I stocked up on food and coffee, and according to my calculations, I could make it there just before midnight. I hit the road early in the evening and did my best to zone out. The desert looked beautiful at sunrise and sunset. Between those times, however, it grew repetitive. Hill after hill and bend after bend, it all looked the same. I snapped out of it a little over an hour into the trip when I saw him. A hitchhiker in an army green shirt and cargo pants is ambling down the side of the freeway. When he saw me, he stuck his thumb out desperately. Normally, I do not stop for hitchhikers, especially somewhere so isolated. But this was a little different. The heat of the desert in June is the kind of temperature that can kill someone, and there seemed to be no one else but me. I wasn't going to let him into my car. All I had to do was roll down my window and see if I could call for help for him. Maybe toss him some food and water while he waits. I slowed down and pulled over. He was old, probably nearing if not over 60. He did not look to be in too bad shape. His clothes were clean, and he hadn't been sweating much, which made me think his car must have broken down a short distance ahead. Just before my car came to a complete stop, I looked out the passenger window at him, and I saw his shadow. It was directly behind him, just like the sun. I felt bile rise up in my throat as my heart rate spiked. To this day, I don't know why I had such a visceral reaction to something as simple as a shadow. It just felt so wrong, something my mind could not process, so all it could do was tell me to run. And I did. My foot was on the brake 1 second, and in the next the gas was on the floor. I briefly glimpsed his frustrated expression as I peeled away from the roadside and down the freeway. The image of that moment remained. For the next half hour, I tried to reason away the fear gnawing at my chest. It must be the heat. Maybe I hadn't been drinking enough water. I could be going crazy. It is funny how your brain does that. How it tries to convince you you're insane because it doesn't understand. It works because by sundown, I was feeling a little guilty about how I left that man on the side of the road. Logic dictated that I go back and try to help him. Yet a raw fear kept me from it. Some German philosophers wrote about these feelings some centuries ago. Some deeper sense lies beneath your logic and reasoning. The will to life, he called it, trumps all other emotions. So in the end, I did not go back. I pulled over and called the police instead. It was illegal to walk to the freeway. They would go look for him. And as long as they found him before sunrise, he would be all right. I hung up the phone and took a moment to compose myself. Everything would be fine. By sunrise tomorrow, I will be drinking coffee with my friends by the ocean. I relaxed my muscles and took several deep breaths. In and out. In and out. I slumped backward and let my hands fall from the steering wheel. They tapped the blinker and flashed my high beams. There was someone standing in front of my car. I didn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. I don't know how I managed to throw the car into the driveway, but I did. I swear to God, I was planning on running him over, that same hitchhiker in cargo pants and a green shirt. But in the last second, his eyes reflected my headlights. They did not look malicious. Just tired, very tired. I couldn't do it. I swerved left and barely missed. "I'm trying to help," he shouted as I drove by. But I paid no heed. He continued shouting as the distance between us dragged ever longer. "Damn you," he screamed as he sprinted forward. "Look around. It's all wrong." I watched from my mirror as he disappeared into the night. The land was flat, but his voice seemed to echo. I tried to forget what he said. I really did. But it was no use. I began to pay close attention to everything, to all 5 of my senses. First, it was the sound of the tires along the road. I drove over rocks, sand, and potholes, but the noise just sounded the same. And then it all started to unravel. Everything just seemed wrong. The sand was too smooth, the moon was too round, and the road was too straight. How long have I been driving? I was really going insane. My breathing became ragged, and my hands shook so badly that I could barely keep the car straight. Finally, I gave up and hit the brakes. I didn't even bother pulling over. I closed my eyes for a bit and tried to calm myself. When I opened them again, I looked toward the sky instead, at the stars. This time I really did scream. The constellations were gone. I don't mean that I couldn't see the stars. I could see all of them in the night sky, but all of them were wrong. It was as if someone had scattered them like salt across a table. There were no patterns, no groupings, just nothing. I couldn't see Scorpio or Cassiopeia. Even Polaris in the north was gone. I screamed again. That scream, looking back now, saved my life. It was loud, but before it reached its peak, it cracked like a faulty record player. Not naturally, as your vocal cords do. The sound seemed to break for a moment and then start louder again. Somehow, in the swirling mass of confusion that was in my mind, I had an idea. I've tried to think of many ways to explain it, and the best one is not very dignified. Whatever illusion this was, it was almost like a video game. You do too much, and it isn't smooth anymore. It begins to break and lag. Overloaded enough, and it crashes. I siphoned the gas from my car into various coffee containers I had emptied out. I took them off the road, into the desert, and into the fields of creosote shrubs. In the wildfire prevention course I took, they said these burned most beautifully. I emptied every last drop of fuel into the brush, and with a prayer, I dropped a match. They lit up like the sun. The flames engulfed the gas-covered shrubs and spread across the field. They danced high into the night and twisted around each other in thousands of tiny ribbons. The smoke rose too, and the shadows licked the dirt. Around me, the world began to fall apart. The moon and stars faded away, and the sand lost its color. The fire, as it grew, began to look more and more wrong. Slowly, it lost its colors until it was a mass of red and orange. But it wasn't enough. Whatever created this world was going to struggle until the end. I began to jump and scream, trying to push it over, but it held on like a drowning man to driftwood. Suddenly there was someone standing beside me. Someone with a green shirt and cargo pants. He looked at me then, towards the fire, and he understood. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a slip of metal, a harmonica. He brought it up to his lips and blew, and with one shrill blast, everything shattered. I woke up at the mouth of a cave. My limbs were heavy, and the light stung my eyes. With shaking legs, I pushed myself up and took in my surroundings. I was circled by bodies, all of them shriveled and unmoving. I felt the bile rise again, but I was simply too tired. My body had given up. Among the corpses there was a movement, and I stumbled towards it. He was lying there, his clothing much more tattered than when I saw him on the road. His arms were thin and shriveled. I saw his bones jutting from his skin. He could have been 100 years old. The hitchhiker's eyes met mine, and his chest began to contract as he made a painful gasping sound. Laughter, I realized. He was laughing. After a few moments he stopped and laid his head down gently. Smiling, he died. He had been here too long. The sleep had kept him alive. I looked down deeper into the cave, and I felt what I could only describe as an ancient malice. Some old master of a younger world, a god from when we used to worship the trees and stones. Yet I felt a weariness too, an old and aching pain, like a dying animal that had long outlived its time. When I began to limp out into the sunlight, the walls and ceiling began to shake and groan. A rumble came from the darkness below, but that was it. It could not stop me. It was too weak. Of all the emotions I could feel, what I did not expect was a twinge of pity. Humans feel pity for the most wretched things. I don't know where my car was. I don't remember leaving it. They found me walking along the freeway with nothing but the clothes on my back and a silver harmonica. They told me I had been gone for 3 weeks. I said I pulled over to investigate a rock formation in the distance and couldn't find my car again. They don't believe, I can tell, but what else is there to say? I did not go back to the internship. I found a job in town instead. It has been years since then, and I've never stopped thinking about it. About the fire climbing high into the sky, the death throes of the grand illusion, and the shrill sound of the harmonica. I don't know what it wanted. Maybe it fed off the mere presence of us. It had fought like mad to hang on to us, that's for sure. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Der Will zum Leben, they called it the will to live. I participated in a top-secret OB study in 1997. We discovered something horrific in the Boots Void. I don't have authorization to share this story, so some of the details will be missing. I've tried for the last quarter century to convince the government to declassify the study files, but these days they don't even acknowledge I was ever an employee. My involvement began at age 20, way back in 1997. I'll spare you the math, I'm 47. At the time, I was suffering from interminable lucid dreams. You might consider this a gift rather than a curse. Who doesn't want to control their dream environments? Your subconscious grants you godhood for a brief snatch of time when the membrane dividing the conscious and unconscious thins to a permeable boundary. Only mine extended far beyond the average length. Most experience a few minutes in which to indulge themselves, mostly spent flying, fornicating, or otherwise just meandering in awe. By the time I was a preteen, mine had sprawled across entire nights, subsuming every slumbering moment under lucidity. You'd think a pubescent boy would know how to busy himself with such a sandbox. But after hour upon hour, night after night, and month after month infused with these cosmic powers, I became despondent. Because of the curious time dilation that takes place within a lucid dream, most of my life took place in the lonely confines of my subconscious. Waking life took on a surreal feel, and I struggled to engage. Over the course of my teen years, I tried everything, from valerian root to psychotropics and transcendental meditation. Nothing stemmed from lucidity. In my sophomore year of college, at the behest of my parents, I enrolled in a sleep study, which involved spending a night at a facility with about 1,000 wires attached to my scalp and body. Not exactly the ideal circumstances for a good night's rest, and yet I still managed to slip quickly into a state of deep sleep. I spent the hours in my false kingdom, populated with my own wild imaginings, a gilded cage for a feckless demigod. I'll never forget the look on the attendant's face when he woke me up the following morning, as if I'd been revealed to him as an alien. Of course, he wasn't permitted to share the results, so I waited 2 weeks before I could see the doctor. When I finally sat down with her, she very gently told me that my brain waves exceeded her expertise, as well as that of every one of her colleagues. However, my abnormal mind qualified me to participate in an advanced sleep study involving top scientists in the field. They sought 20 volunteers for their work. Without recourse and desperate to solve my sleep problem, I signed on the dotted line. I had no idea what I'd just committed myself to. The initial phase of the study involved a month at a desert facility in the remote New Mexican wilderness. I came only with a duffel full of clothes and a couple of summer reads to finish before the fall semester. Cell phones were not widely adopted back in '97, to the facilitator's benefit. Had their participants been in contact with the outside world, there surely would have been an information breach. Despite the ominous location and the facility's uninviting brutalism, it began with predictable and non-threatening sleep observance. The uncomfortable helmet of wires was affixed to my scalp for the duration of my sleep, offering the stern researchers a glimpse at my atypical brain. In the mornings, they offered little more than half-hearted smiles and assurances that I was providing them with invaluable data. The change-up came during my second stay when they presented the study subjects with the pod. It was a hollow metal egg, essentially, that we were told to sleep in. Only when I drifted off inside the confines of the pod did my dreams begin to mirror the outside world. Instead of visiting my imagined kingdom, I found myself hovering above the silver egg, where my unconscious body lay. The shock of it startled me awake, and it took the researchers the better part of an hour to calm me back down. It was then that they finally revealed their intentions. The project sought to explore the connection between lucid dreamers and OBS out-of-body experiences. They believed that if they amplified certain brain waves within the lucid dreamer, they could induce such incorporeal mental projections. Despite the excitement of a new frontier for science and human experience, I rejected their aims, expressing my distrust and fear. In response to my hesitancy, they gently reminded me that I had signed certain documents, which entitled them to my time. The tacit message, of course, was that I'd essentially become their prisoner. Nevertheless, it behooved them to play nice. In exchange for my assistance, they promised they would also alleviate the dissociative effect of my lucid dreams with a drug cocktail they'd been assembling, carrots and sticks. So we entered the targeting phase. Now that we had established OBS as scientific facts with a series of basic tests that involved projectors reading notes in adjacent rooms, it was time for the next step. The researchers instructed us to stretch our abilities, reaching out into space. This was how I visited each of the planets in our solar system, learned of the submarine species beneath the ice sheets of Europa, the defunct alien outpost on Pluto, and, when my projection achieved intergalactic range, the advanced interstellar empires of the Andromeda Galaxy. But the researchers were conspicuously disinterested in these discoveries, logging them with the same dispassionate nonchalance as a report of a Jupiter storm. During my third stay at the facility, the researchers held briefings on targets of interest, various points in distant space they wanted their projectors to visit. By then, we'd grown so accustomed to the practice of sending our consciousnesses at speeds vastly exceeding light into deep space that none of the volunteers questioned the mission. At first, they sent us to various star clusters, dust clouds, and black holes, interested in whether we found an alien presence in the vicinity. But I had the suspicion that these were merely test runs to hone our accuracy in preparation for a more important target. When they proposed a mission to the Boots Void, there was an appreciable shift in tone. Despite performing the same routine, I sensed a greater importance of this particular target. I had my suspicions confirmed one night when the screams from the neighboring pod severed my connection with NGC 1300, returning my perception to my body with an alarming jolt. I rose out of my egg to see a host of researchers crowding around the woman I knew only as participant 12, since they barred us from sharing personally identifiable information. She sat up in her pod, her eyes squeezed halfway out of her skull, as though prodded from the inside. "It's there," she cried. "It's there, and it sees me. Oh God, it sees me." What saw her, I inquired. Where did she go? None of the researchers paid me any attention, but P14, scrubbing sleep from his eyes, answered. 12 was the first to visit the supervoid. "God, he sees me, and he won't let go." Suddenly, her body went rigid. Then she convulsed. The researchers hauled her out of the pod and carried her off to the medical wing. We never saw her again. Whenever we asked about her, the facilitators scolded us for seeking personal information. We weren't trying to identify her. We just wanted to know if she was all right. If we were going to be all right. They sent the projectors one at a time to the void, though each one came back having missed their target. That, of course, was a lie. They had intentionally misfired. We'd all heard what happened to P12, and that scared the hell out of everyone. When my turn came, the researchers warned me they would punish me if I failed to accomplish my task. They knew I was more than capable and had shown myself to be a reliable projector for them, much to my chagrin. As I dozed off, employing the tactics we had developed over the course of the program, which I will abstain from relaying to you, as it might engender an undesirable response from the study's facilitators, I targeted a star system found on the border between the Ursa Major supercluster and the Boots Void. As my consciousness materialized in the vacuum of space, I felt an ineffable sense of dread, as if experiencing the collective fear of 1,000 vast, intergalactic empires crying out into oblivion. No, for oblivion. It's difficult now to express, as when I hovered there on the verge of that immense nothing, I was joined with something, a consciousness much larger than my own. A sort of bubble enveloping the Boots Void. A cognitive shield. A mental warning sign cautioning me not to trespass. There was some communication that transpired between my own consciousness and that of the dome encasing the dark. In summary, I was told that within the void lurked an incomprehensible evil, or what I now translate as evil, because I think at the time the sensation of language transcended human invention, which lacked sufficient vocabulary to describe what occupied the Boots Void. There are 73 galaxies inside the supervoid, of which 60 have been discovered by earthbound astronomers. Each one of them is a facsimile of another, a replica. Among them is a perfect recreation of the Milky Way, complete with all its life forms. I was given this bit of information by the mind that enfolded the void. When asked for what purpose and by whom, it explained, its motives exceed your comprehension. At the conclusion of our dialogue, I peered into the darkness and sensed a great eye peeling open, holding me in its malicious gaze. Before I shrank away, I felt it reaching out for me and inviting me to stay. I returned with enough material to spare me the researchers' rebuke. They conducted 3 more expeditions to the Boots Void, each using another participant, each ending as disastrously as participant 12. The last visitor returned mute, with black eyes. Within days, he lost all his hair, teeth, fingers, and toenails. He refused to eat and spent his final hours using the keyboard he'd been given to communicate with to write a single line ad infinitum. He is the prince who ate the king, and all his subjects will invert themselves for all eternity. He died one night in his pod, when its wiring short-canceled, and plunged the entire facility into a 15-hour blackout. The participants were sent home the following day, and to my knowledge, the facility closed down. The program dissolved, and I received meager compensation for my time as a projector. 2 years later, after raising a stink, I received a prescription for a medication specially delivered to my local pharmacy that finally put an end to my lucid dreams. But in their place, I have nightmares, and lately, they've gotten worse. Of a great eye's malevolent gaze tirelessly watching. I have the terrible feeling that whatever we discovered in the Boots Void wants now to ensnare us, and I fear it will, first in dreams, then for eternity. This is why I'm telling you this now, because the government refuses to warn you. If you dream of a dark god reaching out for you, hide yourself, because he longs to invert you for all eternity. I'm being hunted. This is a warning for you. I'm going to say this up front. This is the first time I'm telling this story. I never wanted to bring this up with any of my family and friends, and while it may be because I think they would never believe me, I never want to think about this again in my life. But now I have no choice, and I'm just tired of it all. And I can't figure out why this happened. I just need this to end before something bad happens. This started when I was working full-time at a restaurant. Growing up in New York City, New York, I've gotten used to many different people daily. And I mean any type of person you could think of. Whatever you can think of has come and gone, and I could deal with it. But that also makes things harder since I'm the backbone, and has me working more than the rest since I was the most reliable, despite working the same wage. Anyway, on one of the late night shifts, my best friend Adrian had shown up with another person with him, my girlfriend. He had always been a brother to me, and we've gone through it all to stay together. He's got a new girlfriend, while I'm currently seeing someone else as well. That night I saw him, and my girl paying a visit to my work to mess with me while I was scrubbing a table that had puke on it. Yo, Adrian called me out. Your girl was thinking of hosting a little house party. Can't you tell me after work? Well, that's the thing, we're all going tonight. Don't you see, I'm already dealing with enough? Wait, and you'll be going now? It's going to be late by the time I clock out. I also have to pack since you're nice enough to tell me last minute. Sorry, it was last minute, my girl said. I immediately smiled at her gently after wishing Adrian would get hit by a car, and I laughed in the background. My dad's friend was thinking of demolishing the place, but I asked them if we could use it for a get-together. I'm bringing all my friends. It's so nice, it has a giant backyard pool and a game room. We are all bringing board games and drinks. It's going to be a 4-day thing, she said with a beaming smile that I couldn't get enough. Adrian laughed. Yeah, I just had to come. As I was polishing the table, I looked at the clock. It was 5 minutes before 11 p.m. And they were going tonight, they said. Wait, tonight? It was that thought that kicked in for me. And if I had to say, it was the point where things started going downhill from there. I never had a gut feeling this strong and sinister, like my senses were shooting up through the roof. It was unnerving, because this was supposed to be the greatest idea ever. Working hard, and then having several shots at a luxurious place with my crush and best friend? I couldn't leave the offer, which made this feeling all too difficult. And looking back at it, I wish I had listened to my fatigue, but even then, I wouldn't know what would have happened to me. All right, sure. Listen, I need to get back to work, but I'll see you. Where's it at? They told me to take the subway, because it was practically across the state. Now, I was annoyed at this stupid dilemma to end my night, but what I'm about to mention is something I never understood why it all went downhill from there. There was a man who was sitting behind me the entire time. He was finishing up his plate taken by my coworker, and he drank his water as we glanced at each other. He looked to be in his 20s. He had jet black hair that was slicked back with some shiny gel and a slim but sturdy, tanned face. He was wearing something very elegant, like a tuxedo with a draping coat. He looked lean and fit as well, with some of the straightest posture I've ever seen. This dude did not look like he belonged in a restaurant, where some kids would run around like it's a requirement here. But again, it's New York. He may as well be a model, the perfect cast member for a superhero movie. Or some shit. The trains are empty, as of now. Vacant and not a single soul for peace. It'll do your world good, all of us turned when he spoke. I don't know about everyone else, but I felt a sudden hit of sadness. It was almost like I was hit with a sense of impending doom, and I just realized I could never escape. I never experienced anything like this, so I had no idea what was going on. He continued, "Have you ever traveled all the way there? To that specific area? I reckon you all bid caution." The two were silenced since they were very confused. "Look, man, I appreciate your concern, but we're sort of busy right now. I tried to keep an act just to make things easier, but I wish I could have handled that better, because I could have sworn his eyes turned darker, and he made a slight frown. It was like he watched me with eyes like a wolf or something, ready to kill me. I felt trapped. I'll leave you alone to do whatever you want, but a word of advice, you should listen. Very carefully, that is, he stood up, his eyes didn't move anywhere else. Take that vacation before you break in ways you never knew you could. It's always the ignorant that dies the easiest. Don't make that day earlier than it should be, although some due dates are well-deserved. Who knows, really? It's the numbers that always speak in. Then the cattle that struggle. The bloodshed is not all you think. Idiot, he paid for his meal and left. The three of us were stuck in this weird situation of what to think. What the fuck was that, Adrian said. Anyways, look, we're all going to head there. Hey, you're all right. I nodded and told them I needed to get back to work. They hesitantly left, but everything got weirder when my manager came by after they left. For context, she had to be the best manager I knew so far. She wasn't on the nose with everything and was helping other people do their jobs. And while she had arguments with other managers and employees before, she never did anything against them. She even gave me the day off so I could be on a date with someone who'd eventually be my crush. I'm going to miss her once I move on with something else. This was the first time I had seen her face pale. You know him, she almost stuttered. If someone who was the most collected person in this group reacted to the man like this, you can tell how things were going down from there. I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it, I said. I just wanted to go to the house and enjoy my time off. You can clock out right now. Please be safe, she said. But our last words still stuck with me if I had to think about her. That man's been coming here every day for a while now. You didn't notice him. I never seen him before. This was the first time. He called your full name this morning when he sat at that same spot. I think he wanted to talk. I left promptly without further talking about it. My mouth felt dry, my head was spinning, and I thought I was going to vomit. I swear to you that I've never seen that man nor heard of him call my full name, which only a few would know anyway. Sure, I may not be aware of my surroundings, especially if I'm working. People aren't my main concern when it comes to getting paid to do a job. But I could definitely remember something as strange as him. It took me a while, once I calmed down out of the restaurant, to understand what situation I was in. Go home and rest it off, or forget it all and deal with the worst hangover I could think of. I'll be honest, I wouldn't know what to do if I went home. Would that man be waiting for me? What did he want? What did I do that pissed him off? In haste, I decided it was best just to take the subway. My mind was not feeling right. I thought once I got there, I could pay for some clothes over there. There should be some thrift stores nearby, right? Walking alone at night was the most unsettling thing I could ever put myself through because of that man, but at the time I think I was thrown so off that my logic was rattled. I ended up finding myself at the subway entrance, going downstairs slowly, holding on to that guardrail like I was waiting for something to jump behind me. I felt like I was paranoid as hell. Reasoning with my fight or flight state wouldn't make things better, so I followed with my plan and at least had my guard up. 11 p.m. in New York is a gamble on its own, but I couldn't tell what's wrong or right. When I made it down to the bottom of the steps, I pulled my shirt to hover over my nose when I smelled the worst thing possible. At that moment, I couldn't take it anymore, and I threw it up to the side. I made my way straight to the subway after puking my guts. I was completely lost, confused, and extremely scared. My senses were almost gone, and I was left with choices I could barely make on my own. Everything in my peripherals was a blur since I had the most intense tunnel vision ever. Just as I was power walking for less than a minute, I heard a loud bang from behind. It didn't sound like a gun, but like a large object hitting the wall or something. It sounded distant, but I froze, staring at the floor. I heard some voices in front of me, like they were in the deepest part of a hallway. From what I remembered, they all sounded like guys, but the weirdest part was that they sounded the same. It was as if someone was talking at different pitches with the same voice as an experienced voice actor would. But I think what made me terrified of the dangers was that the same type of voice from different people came from the guy from the restaurant. One of them had a raspy and loud tone and was yelling in anger. The other had a more high-pitched tone, sounding apologetic while the raspy voice yelled at him. Were there two different people that sounded like one by coincidence? Then, it sounded like they walked away while still yelling at each other, and I stood in place for a while, waiting. After a moment of silence, I told myself I was just imagining things, and they appeared real because I was scared and sick. Maybe I ate something bad in the break room fridge, or I didn't heat my food properly. I thought of all the possible reasons why I felt like the world didn't feel real. I slowed down, and as my breath stabilized, my thoughts began to become more organized. I walked slower, leaning against the wall in case something came up, watching every item to use for escape, cover, and even defense. For a while, everything was silent in the tunnels. While it isn't uncommon to be alone on the subway, the way that things changed from chaos to calm was unnerving. But I still told myself I'd rather be scared than killed. I didn't know what that noise was back there, but I had to stop caring. I was going to enjoy my time off. I have to at this point. It felt like minutes with how I was walking, so I slowly increased my pace as I got comfortable, and there wasn't any scare. But as time went on smoothly, that was when I started noticing the smaller things around me. There was no security in sight. At most, it was the camera. but I couldn't care less. No one else was present besides the voices that I heard, and everything was dead quiet. The only sounds I could hear were the fluorescent lighting above me and some flies and mice scurrying across me. Maybe it was because I felt like my life was in danger, but let me tell you, I never paid attention to every single thing before me in my life, and that smell was the most outstanding. The same stench that made me puke came back, still as strong as ever. Now, I've dealt with trash shit and other putrid things you'd find at the bottom of a restaurant dumpster at the heart of some of the busiest cities in the country, let alone smell them, so the fact this made me react was bizarre. To make matters worse, this was not a one-time thing. Every hallway that led in a different direction from the one I was taking had that smell when I passed by. My thoughts were all thinking of whatever it was, and I sure as hell was not going to visit to find out. I prayed to God that I wouldn't take a detour. My eyes were all glued to one thing and one thing only. That fucking subway. At last I made it. As a New Yorker, I was a regular there, so I jumped over those turnstiles and made my way to the subway. Feeling relieved that nothing happened in between, I looked down at my clothes, which made me feel so gross that I'd need a baptism rather than a shower. Then the expected echoes of the train grew stronger as I waited. I felt like things were going smoothly. I saw the headlights, and I could feel that stupid smile on my face. But it dropped when I turned and saw the clock. 2:07 a.m. I swear to you, I had no idea how I took that long. Sure, I walked slowly, but it shouldn't take about 3 hours. I felt like I was there for at least 40 minutes. I bet Adrian and my girlfriend were thinking I should stay home. I felt guilty, but most of all, I wanted to get out of here. Thinking about them made me feel safe, and I want to see them. The doors opened, and I immediately went in. I looked around, and there was no one in the seats. Well, that's relieving, but not for long. Since I know people who work super early, I'd probably have my nap interrupted. I slumped in my seat, trying to make a plan in my head, but I was too tired and scared to even think straight. The doors closed, and I closed my eyes to rub them, taking a second rest from those damn lights. When I opened them, I still couldn't see anything. I froze, and I reached my hand to feel that cold part of the seat to at least know I was in reality, but I couldn't see it until it was super close to me. After making sure I didn't take a nap, this was a blackout that happened at the same time I closed my eyes. I cursed and kicked the seat in front of me in anger, realizing that the train was not budging. I reached into my pockets to get my phone, something I should have done long ago, but I heard rustling in the back seats behind me. Someone sighed heavily. I swear to God that I didn't see anyone there. I definitely would have even seen a small child from that distance, so how did I see him? The doors needed to be forced open since there was no power, and I didn't see any flashlights to guide him in the dark, so how? The only thought, and I think this remains true, was that this guy was on the very corner of the train in a ball, huddled in a tight ball. I heard laughter then from the same type of voice. This was not the raspy, high-pitched, or clear tone of the restaurant. This one was quieter and subtle with a low tone, almost close to a whisper, but everything else was audible, almost like his voice close to my ear. I didn't turn around, I just sat there, realizing that my anger woke up whoever was hidden and sleeping. The laugh wasn't something crazy, but almost mocking. "Who do we have here?" the voice sounded. Even though my eyes could adjust to the darkness, I couldn't make out everything. I didn't see any flashlight or something the guy could use to make his way since it was pitch black, but he was making his way down easily. Every step he took was slow. It felt like a minute between every placed foot that echoed. It was all I could hear that was coming towards me. I only sat there. I didn't know what to do or what was going to happen if I tried running. I was trapped, and I only hoped that he didn't do anything to me. The lights went on, but they flickered so violently that I couldn't see anything. From inside and out of the train, my eyes were becoming disoriented, and I had to shield them. At this point, I couldn't do anything but let the man do whatever he planned. Then, the sound of the buzzing lights went back on. Through my hands, I watched from the sides, through the windows. It was only darkness. I couldn't see anything except for my reflection, and the man who was watching me. From the reflection alone, I could see that he was wearing a dark face mask covering his mouth. He was wearing a beanie that covered his messy, long hair that traveled to the end of his neck. He wore black and red flannel, a black shirt, denim jeans, and green shoes. I went silent. staring at the reflecting window to see if he was going to acknowledge me. I saw him taking another step away from me, but my heart sank when I saw he was slowly sitting on the chair in front of me, leaning towards me. Hey, despite the voice being low, I felt my body going cold, and I started to feel uneasy again. Hey, it was like my body had a physical reaction again. At this point, I thought this was the same man wearing a different set of clothes. It was the only reason I could believe it after all this time. I turned, and I spotted the details that made me want to run. The guy had dark, crazy-looking eyes, jet black hair, tan skin, and an athletic build. The only difference from the restaurant was that he had a slight beard just protruding from the mask. I thought the man was purposely wearing a different type of clothing just to mess with me. What am I supposed to believe at this point? Oh, look at you. You're shivering, coated in fear, like you should. Praying for the first time since you're in danger for the first time. How exciting. Fear. Cry, tremble like you're about to die. Because you are. I was in shock as his voice was slightly raised. He was laughing and sounded even more insane. He kept watching me, and I was waiting to see what he'd do. Then, the light flickered violently again, and he reacted to it. It's time to celebrate the passing of the light, the withering of safety, and the chaining of your farewells with a delicious anchor. I want to see your eyes for an eternity. The lights disoriented my vision again, but I saw him through the flashing, dancing violently. He was flailing his arms and legs while still making sure I couldn't escape. Please, please. Oh, my favorite music. My entire being is ready. Let your death be at my shrine. Death, get him already. My head was leaning on the glass behind me, watching in shock as I barely could see thanks to the lights, and his movements were blinding fast. Then I felt a jolt of pain hit the back of my head. I was hit so hard that I fell to the ground, closing my eyes as I wrapped my head tightly, trying to cover the sounds of the chaos I got myself into. I screamed, trying to drown out all the noises, but the lights turned back on and everything went silent. I expected to see the man when I inched my head forward, staying on the floor to see what he was going to do with me. I didn't see him in front of me, but he was further away at the end of the car, standing completely still with his head tilting. Open the fuck up, maggot. Open up or I'll make it ugly than your face. It was the raspy voice again, sounding with thunderous bangs from the windows. I quickly turned and saw the figure in front of the door that was ramming his fists into the window, shattering it with just a couple of punches. I knew at this point I was in danger. This man had the same look as the other two men so far. Same height, same build, same skin color, same colored hair, and the same type of voice that has just changed in pitches and whatever. This one's clothing had a tight gray shirt, black cargo pants, combat boots, and a black ball cap. He had a stubble, shorter than the flannel guy, and the muscles were on full display. I was convinced that he was able to force the subway doors out of the way, but since he literally bent them, they weren't able to be tucked away fully. You just had to make it difficult, you fucker. We said not to keep that house and you all ignored. You need to die. Get the over, you bastard. I heard the other man in the mask laughing. In my peripheral vision, it looked like he was hanging onto the rails above, his body almost dangling as he was climbing up while I was backing up from the floor. I can't taste it. I can smell it. You must have smelled the ones back there. Isn't that the most beautiful scent in the world? I want more. Pleasure from the cold hands to your throat, and let your thread burn in the feast. I always, from that morning, remembered how everything happened in perfect detail because, and I may be wrong, the very strong smell was from the dead bodies. This man who was yelling had a face that I could tell wanted to kill me by using his bare hands while cursing his brains out. The other guy was crazy enough to see me about to get killed. And looking back, it might be the sophisticated bastard that planned this. But I focused more on running, and I used this opportunity to run before the door violently closed again. As I stepped out of the car, I saw the two men there. Now their eyes were watching me, but the enraged man yelled some more, and he moved to the other door, kicking and punching with the most powerful strikes I've ever seen. I turned and was thinking of ways to run and disorient them, thinking that the lights would flicker again. I saw a straight line of obstacles and doors that led to my escape. I booked it, and I ran as fast as I could, while the guy broke free and started running. He was faster, making the sound of his hard boots echo louder the closer he got. I was throwing trash cans, moving between poles, and doing whatever moves I could think of, but he was still on my tail. Then the lights started flickering, messing with my eyesight again, before I went to one of the doors. There was a trash can next to the door, so I picked it up and swung it to the man. I clearly hit him since I heard him groan, but I didn't wait, even with the slightest chance of dying. I heard the subway cart moving, and through the violent lights, I decided to use one of those indents in the wall to flush my body to let the subway pass. I made sure as I jumped, landed, and stayed still that I did it perfectly. Sure enough, I closed my eyes and I could feel the force of the vehicle almost brushing past me. It passed me, but it stopped slowly. The light stopped flashing and stayed steady. Unfortunately, the view from the last window was clear enough for them to see me from the inside, and I could see them. I didn't want to move, because there was another man who walked out of the train. It was another doppelganger of the past three, only he was wearing a bright red sweater, a white shirt, black jeans, and Converse shoes. His hair was long and unkempt in a ponytail, but his face was clean-shaven, like a businessman. He was smiling as he clapped his hands together. Woo! That was fun. Wait a second. Where's the rest? I probably messed with the lights too much. I thought he would kill him once he was in the subway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. Damn. Out of battery. We'll get him next time. Surely now is definitely not the time. Oh, hey you three. We gotta get going. Should we get the train going? How was it for you guys? That voice was the lightest, the one that was apologizing at the raspy. Then I saw them coming together to board the train without looking at me. I saw all four, including the businessman. They all talked and bickered amongst themselves, but I stopped paying attention since my main goal after the train was to get out. The subway left, and I immediately booked it. I continuously ran all the way to my home, ignoring everything until I got home. I didn't bother checking the news to see if the bodies were discovered, or if the damages were recorded. They most likely were. But I didn't care about it because things got more serious. I called my work, my friends, and my girlfriend to tell them that I couldn't attend for anything, but I never told them why. I wasn't hurt at all, so I couldn't fake a sickness, but would anyone believe me? Would I want to say it like it was real? It may have been, but I can't even tell anymore. I have a feeling it was all orchestrated by nature itself. But the main reason I'm telling you this is because my friend was taking a selfie from their trip there. And in one of the photos I immediately recognized. There was the man with the ponytail, smiling and having fun with my friend's beer in his hand. I'm going to call Adrian up about this, but if you ever see one of them, avoid them no matter what. If they acknowledge you, your fate is decided for whatever reason. They know who I am and who my connections are. It's only a matter of time before I'm done. Enjoy life. Because you never know what is coming for you, for whatever reason.